Okay, great. Looks like we're live streaming. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Judicial Proceedings Committee. This is our briefing on police use of force. Obviously, as we
Hold on one second. The feed's not up yet.
Got it. Little test run.
We are good.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Judicial Proceedings Committee briefing on police use of force. Obviously, as we head into session in a couple of days, police reform and use of force will be certainly a big topic of discussion for us as we move into the next legislative session and we review a comprehensive package of police reform. So today we have basically a 2-hour slot of time for our briefing. We've got remarks from the Police Training and Standards Commission. We've got Sheriff Berry with us. And we also have the founder of Close Quarters Defense, Dwayne Deiter, that will give us a briefing as well. I think that both aspects of this presentation will be instructive for the members of the committee because they'll give us a baseline understanding of how police use of force standards are developed and how they're implemented throughout the state, and how there's an element of quality control, just a kind of a slow walk through that process. And then for Close Quarters Defense, we'll be privy to some information and some training and some background from one of the experts in the country and in the world, trained law enforcement and military veteran and law enforcement, and has had over 30 years of experience in this arena. And so I think that perspective and that expertise will be a benefit for our committee members as we move forward in the session to make some critical decisions on the future of use of force and the standards and the implementations of those standards in the state of Maryland. So with that, I'll pause and I'll turn over the Zoom room to Sheriff Berry of the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission. And so Sheriff Berry, the floor is yours. Thank you all for your attendance today.
Thank you, Chairman Smith and the members of the Judicial Proceeding Committee. Again, I'm Sheriff Berry with Charles County Sheriff's Office, and I'm also the chairman of the Police Training and Standards Commission. And with me today is also Mr. Albert Liebno of the Police and Correctional Training Commission. And we've been asked to give an overview of use of force policies and practices within the state. First up, Police Training and Standards Commission, as many of you know, was established as a body by the Maryland legislature to govern and certification and training in the state of Maryland. The original Police Training Commission was established in April of 1966, and a result of House Bill 1016, the commission was abolished. And on September 30th of 2016, by the state legislature, that the newly created Police Training and Standards Commission was established in October 1st of 2016. The commission is comprised of 24 members of the state, and these individuals include citizens, include General Assembly members, and law enforcement professionals. The Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission established the training objectives for entry-level police officers, annual in-service training, first-line supervisors, and also first-line administrators. As outlined in COMAR, which you guys are very much familiar of, and also House Bill 1016, the commission adopts and recommends a set of best practices and standards for use of force. The commission's practices and standards are found on mdl.net for your review. And police agencies, when we did this, was encouraged to revise policies, including sanctity of life. Officers are trained in de-escalation practices before any force is used. And in addition, based on legislative mandates, all agencies are mandated annually to submit a number of serious police officer involved incidents and officer discipline. And also that information can be found on mdl.net. When we look at COMAR and those specific regulations, particularly when it talks about law enforcement, use of force training, it talks about in that particular chapter, it outlines what the commission is required to do. The commission basically sets up firearms classroom instruction and training and qualifications. It also authorizes the use of carry of a firearm. And the commission, again, and I'll hear me very clearly, it sets a minimum requirement for particular firearms trainings. And the agency, every respective agency, can adopt more stringent requirements for our firearms classroom instruction and training and qualification. So again, that the commission sets the best standards. When we in the Charles County Sheriff's Office conduct our annual use of force training with our staff members, we're covering a host of things: aerosol spray, collapsible baton, lethal force, and non-lethal force. And it's clearly stated in our policies, employees will use only the amount of force necessary to accomplish a lawful purpose. And it goes into, again, compliance of a lawful order, to make a lawful arrest when resistant to that arrest is encountered, to repel an attack upon an employee, to defend a fellow employee or citizen from attack, to prevent a prisoner unlawful escape from custody, or any other circumstance allowed by law. Those things are covered in our policies and also our training. And I didn't want to bore you today because we have almost 300 plus slides when it comes for long gun qualification, handgun qualification, taser qualification, collapsible baton. But all of those things are also, we also mandate that there is a sanctity of life piece, a de-escalation piece, and also a duty to intervene piece that is in our policy and also are taught by our staff members. But in that de-escalation piece, we also have come up with a program which is talked about tactical communication when we're dealing with people in our community. And we must factor in those that may have a mental health component. That's the issue. Someone may that be under substance abuse, that's alcohol, legal drugs, or illegal drugs. And we're also training our staff members to be very cognizant of individuals that have psychiatric conditions. That may be thought disorders, mood disorders, anxiety disorders, or even personality disorders. So we train our staff members in regards to tactical communication and de-escalation tactics to be able to hopefully bring any particular encounter that we have with our general public to a peaceful conclusion. So again, the commission sets set best practice out to the law enforcement agency, and then those respective agencies take that information and construct policy and training modules based on the minimum standards that are set by the commission. Again, this is just a brief overview. Again, I'll be willing to take some questions, and I would defer to Mr. Al Leadno if he has any additional remarks that he would like to make.
All right, thanks, Sheriff Berry. What we're going to do is we'll do this a little different. So we only have two presenters today.
Okay.
So we can take questions. Actually, we can take questions from the committee right now for you and for Al, and then we can move on to Dwayne. So if anyone has questions now, I think Senator Sidner, I see you leaning in. Do you have a question? Got it. All right, let's go for it.
Well, thank you very much. And good afternoon. Just out of curiosity, when it comes to the use of force information, I think there's a form that is usually collected by police forces. Is that data by any chance analyzed by anyone on the commission?
We do have a suggested policy in practice in reference to use of force reports. We mandate that they be completed by the end of an officer shift. And I would defer to Mr. Abolino in reference to any analysis of those particular reports.
Yeah, no, sir. There's no analysis. It's a report that is prepared and published annually for the benefit of anyone that wants to take a look at it. And that does go to the legislature too. It's published on our website.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you all would mind kind of walking us kind of like soup to nuts from the academy, like how are the standards dispersed and kind of articulated and then enforced, not enforced, but how's the quality control for the academies? Because I know we have 2 members of our committee that are probably intimately familiar with the PTSC, but for the folks that are less familiar, just in terms of how things are structured. And so, different academies generally adhere to the one standard of guidance, but that you're going to have a different product from a different county and a different academy. Just could you walk us through that? Because I think that, there may be a lack of familiarity with just how this whole thing is structured.
Al, did you want to take that and talk about the number of academies and how we go about conducting audits and things of that nature?
Yes, that's not a problem. I'm having a little trouble getting unmuted. I'm sorry for the
No worries.
delay. Yeah. There's 20 academies in the state that do police training. One of them is actually run here at the training center in Sykesville under our direct supervision here, but the other 19 are dispersed across the state. They have a mandatory minimum standard of 260 some objectives that have to be met. And then there's an additional 400 and some, and what we refer to as enabling objectives that support those 265 terminal objectives, mandated objectives, that every recruit has to either be academically tested or performance-wise tested and evaluated to ensure compliance with the commission's mandates. They are based on job task analysis. And I will advise you currently, we are working with a company that is updating that job task analysis that will provide the commission with updated information and direction later this year at the conclusion of their study. It is a very comprehensive study into the basic requirements of a police officer at the beginning of their career. The other thing the commission does to ensure, and Senator Smith, you mentioned ensure quality, is every other year, every one of those academies' records are audited, reviewed by my staff here that supports the commission's requirements, and actually physically review the academy's records to ensure that they are totally in compliance with the commission's regulation requirements. If not, we work with them to become compliant. And if there's an issue that can't be worked out, that is reported directly to the commission for their action upon those particular situations.
No, thank you. Appreciate that. We're looking around the Zoom room. Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you both for taking your time and lending your expertise. We've received your materials, and I'm sure that as we move forward in the next couple weeks here, we'll be seeing each other a lot more on Zoom, but we'll definitely, ask for your advice and expertise and input on the proposals that come before us in the next couple of weeks. So just appreciate you taking the time and appreciate your service to the state. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, next we'll turn over to CQD with Mr. Deiter. Obviously, the floor is yours. Obviously, you have an extensive, you could go a little bit into your background, but extensive background in training, not only law enforcement, but our United States military. And I've had an opportunity to go down to your facility a couple of times and was just very impressed with your work. And so I thought that your background and your skill set and expertise and your perspective would be beneficial to our committee as we go forward in evaluating some of the issues that we're looking at, especially with respect to training. So if you could, the floor is yours, and I'll hand it over to you. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you so much, everyone. It's an honor to be here. My name is Dwayne Deiter, born and raised on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and my father and my parents are ministers. So I've been close to the community my whole life. Very fortunate for me at a young age. I was able to see some of the conflicts and dangers by seeing a woman being attacked at one moment at a very young age. That led me to try to know that if I ever saw this again, how I would defend myself. At 15, I started martial arts, trained in all variety of martial arts that also included shooting. When finally I was able to do some police work and got to learn the various skills there, I noted that I didn't necessarily have the confidence that if a motivated adversary or suspect or threat would attack me, what would I really do? Well, I got that opportunity, and upon doing it, though I was able to best the person, I did not use any of the skills that I had learned, not one. That led me to a quest to find out, one, why didn't I use those particular skills I learned? And two, it was exceedingly stressful, like no other stress that I'd learned or felt before. Being a competitor, doing national events, it was not that level of stress. Being in altercations throughout my life, as many of you have had to do, it was not that level of stress. So I traveled throughout the East Coast, tried to find those answers, could not exactly find the answer. And the biggest question was in two parts. One, what happens when the threat of any description surprise attacks you? The highest level of criminality is always that way. The wonderful police officers that have to deal with this day in, day out is not where it's said to them, this is what we're going to do to you. It's done immediately. So that stress was something that I'd never felt before, nor had the answers. The second component was to know that is a tremendous power to have that authority and to be the mentor and have a person guide me as a proper character in use of force. I traveled throughout the United States, and not finding that answer, I then eventually went to the Far East, different components of Okinawa, Taiwan, Hong Kong to find this answer. I was later led by wonderful people and great masters that what I was asking for exactly, they did not know. And they encouraged me to develop it. They encouraged me to try to find this vision that I had. So I came back to America and started this vision of what would work within that time frame and how can I create stress upon myself to find the answer. And the only answer I could come up with was in a method of creating stress against me to see how I would respond. Being a community member, I wanted to make sure that if I had to use force, it would never be aggressively done or utilized inappropriately, because I'm a big believer in community and how possibly to do the right thing every single time. And it took a 9-year venture to eventually develop this system. We'll go through a little bit of the process coming up, but initially and most importantly is the initial focus is to create a compassionate person, compassionate officer first, who love their community, appreciate their community, and know the difficulties of all the different attributes and aspects of the community. Those that are brought up in tougher positions, those that have had bad things happen to them, addicted of drugs and the different components, that love of those people and understanding of those people allow that compassion to then turn to the second part, which is to be capable to defend the citizens of our state and of our country, to defend ourselves appropriately, and that combination of the compassionate officer, as well as then that person who is capable and tactically ready. In order to understand all these components, it really means that we need to put ourselves in the time frame of that split-second decisions or the capability of the person to recognize exactly what it is that they would do during that moment. I think we all can agree that ourselves, family members, friends, citizens, and people that we know, they do not deserve to be attacked and injured in any fashion. But really, what is it that they should do when they need to defend? What is it that they can do or should do to allow that to happen? What we may think works may not work, and that is where it comes to the presentation that we now would like to start.
And Mr. Deiter, just let me know if I'm on the right slide.
Okay, you can go to the next slide. Let's see, I'm not in unity with their.
And Jamie, is it possible to make it, you just enable editing and then also just make it a presentation mode so we have to see the full screen?
Yes.
Oh, are you not seeing the full screen?
No, we're seeing the kind of the deck. You just click the enable editing and then do the presentation mode.
Let me see that.
The bottom icon to the right next to the
Entire thing.
there you go.
Okay, let's start from the beginning, please. There we go. Okay, next slide. And the next slide, please. So the community should see, because most and the majority of the time, the officers are doing great and incredible things. The more that can be exploited and positioned, the better it is for society to know all the great things police officers do. That's the compassionate side that is many times not seen. Next slide, please. Now, in this situation, you're seeing an officer that is in a what we call assertive position. The suspect is with a rolled up fist. So the objective here is seeing this action, is doing everything he can to de-escalate the pressure and force that a situation is happening. But as you look at it, he's capable. And he's capable recognizing he has all the abilities to defend if necessary, but doesn't need those in this de-escalation mode. Next slide, please. A part of this compassionate and capable officer is what we do is called the HERO training program. And it brings officers that we train and brings the kids of the society and the parents and the mothers and everyone involved into a group of events of training that allows them to see the best of the mentors of the police officers. It allows society, allows the young people to see what their job is, how they apply it correctly, and also join to be mentors of the young kids. The young kids go through training, not tactical training, but training in themselves to be stronger, heroic in their own life, to do the best in school, to be a good family member, to be good and kind to their parents, and to be kind and good to each other. That measure together has brought great success, knowing that it's not one side is the police and the other side is the citizens or society. It all is together. When people understand and recognize what crimes are, that it cannot be tolerated, and that persons work together to empower themselves beyond that, is when the police and society become as one. Next slide, please. This is an example of a Maryland State Police officer who is a very good example of the Maryland State Police, as well as a good citizen, getting with the children, explaining what job he does, how he does it, and why and how it's important for Maryland. Next slide, please. This is a military personnel of all descriptions being able to talk to the children, let the youth know exactly what he does. And in this occasion, they are learning to introduce themselves to that person with great confidence and empowerment. Next slide, please. So in order for us to really recognize the use of force and understand it well, is in every split second, and within a split second, it has to be looked upon what is correct or what is maybe not correct. And we have to look at it to be, what would we do? Next slide, please. So appreciation of the officer and suspect, both understanding how this can combine to be able to use force correctly and what is correct when it becomes lethal or not. So when is it lethal or not depends on the confidence of the officer, knowing what he can and cannot do. Also, it's important for society to know if it was their child, their wife, their mother, or themselves, what would be correct for them to use if someone was trying to injure or harm them? What is lethal? When can we escape? When do we have no choice but to defend? How would we respond? But more importantly, how would all of us respond under stress, under duress? What we know may not be what we do under stress. We may not do it. It may be something very bizarre or different than what we think we can do. And is our training based on how it actually applies? Next slide, please. So if we're trained and have training, is the training correct? Does it apply directly? And if it is, can we use it under duress? So that's the first key moment. The second part comes, if we're not trained in particular, we're going to do what comes naturally. And mostly what comes naturally is excessive in a lot of different occasions, or submissive and stop. What happens when that very aggressive person suddenly surprise attacks you? And within that moment, no matter how nice a person you are, though maybe you have done nothing to bring about such actions and can't escape, what is it that you do? It's the most terrible moment in a person's life where someone tries to hurt them without warning or preparation. Next slide, please. So the truth is based on what is the high risk first. When I developed the system, the first thing I did is not start with the easy things. I developed it what was the hardest things first, the most difficult things. Someone surprising you by punching you, grabbing you, hitting you from behind, starting with shots being fired at you. How do we deal with those encounters? So what we're going to try to do for this moment of time is talk about the high risk fight, what it looks like, and how it responds, so that when we see something and say, was that excessive? We first have to say, was it a high risk fight? Was it actually dangerous? Or did it escalate to be something beyond what should have happened? Next slide. So in this occasion, this is a video. These are older and newer videos of showing how quick. It's within a half a second to a second in which this attack can occur. And the officer many times, or the suspect in other occasions, and also the citizens have no idea what is going to happen at that moment. So we'll play through this, several of them. So you can see without warning and continual aggressiveness, it overtook the officer. You can see how close this attack is. The initial strike knocked the officer unconscious. Though the officer pulled his and drew his weapon first, he still was not able to get a shot off. This shows the motivation of the attacker. Though the officer tried to deal with him in various fashions, the suspect continued to attack, rolled around the ground. The longer the fight goes, the worse it becomes, the more dangerous it becomes for the officer and the suspect. This is a motivated threat. This is what it looks like when the person is motivated to hurt someone else. In this last situation, an officer is held down, beaten, eventually choked, and elbowed continuously with no actions or ability to defend other than scream out for help. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now, in order to understand this, I came up many years ago with a method of recognizing how to look at force by everyone, citizen officers. We call it the three-way test, which is where you have the officer, his skill, her skill, their skill as a team and ability. And then the suspect, what happens at that moment? How are their reactions? What are they doing at that moment? And then the situation. Are you in the street? Do you have backup? Are you by yourself? Are you out in the woods? Those three components allow us to always understand justification of force. Now, if you look at this slide and say, that's a lot to know to make the right decision, well, that decision has to be made every quarter of a second for a police officer. Every quarter of a second, they have to decide their skill and ability, what can they do? The suspect, what is he doing or she doing at that moment? And then the situation and how that changes their focus on the justification of force at that moment. Now, we cannot use force appropriately unless we can create that position of knowing exactly in a half a second, quarter second, how it changes. So for 1 minute, an attack can occur and then the attack stops. As soon as it stops, the officer must stop. They must use other methods. Many times it continues. And we will address that just a bit later. Next slide, please. The snapshot theory is something that as I used and did my police use of force and the DEA task force on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, I wanted to make sure that if I ever had to use my force, how can I ensure that it would be perceived correctly, as well as I would be doing the right thing? So I came up with the snapshot theory, which means if someone, which I do believe in cameras, if someone took a picture of me every moment of my use of force, would it be appropriate and people could see quickly that person is attacking the officer, he's attacking back, he's stopping that attack. But would it also look like, as soon as that attack stops or dealing with other people, would it be correct? A picture truly is worth 1,000 words, and the snapshot theory allows that to be understood and creates much problem and chaos when people see this throughout our country without putting it in context. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a picture that is not appropriate. It's obvious that the person is not attacking or fighting, and it gives the impression of police abusing force, which it is at that snapshot. Next snapshot. Everyone is subdued, everyone is sitting, everyone is not doing anything to be aggressive. That would be a bad snapshot. That would show a position of dislike from society. Next slide. As the person is laying on the ground, being in aggressive posture and beating that person that is not fighting, that is a dangerous snapshot. Immediately gives the impression of abuse of force. Next slide, please. Same again, being held down, the person's not fighting. And that's a key word that I'm going to continue to express as we go through this. What is the suspect doing at the moment, at that exact moment? What is the officer doing at that exact moment? Next slide, please. Suspect is not fighting, is being hit. Next slide, please. Same picture, same snapshot. Next slide, please. Female is cuffed, but yet being kicked in the head. Cannot explain away that picture of what occurred. Next slide, please. And most of them are so obvious. Next slide, please. Now, in much of the situations of arrest, one of the key things that we ensure does not happen is we use every part of discussion, verbalization, to have the person understand what we're doing, have them join along with us, do everything we can, unless it's something dramatic and dynamic happening super fast, to verbalize with the person to allow them to know what we're doing, to do nothing to cause pain or touch them if we don't have to touch them. So in these occasions, you're seeing the knee on the neck, you're seeing the knees on the back, you're seeing the arms grab, creating pain. When the person is complying, there's no need for any type of pain or injury whatsoever. It's merely based on verbalizing, asking them to do the procedure, what they're under arrest for, and how to apply the restraints if necessary to take them into custody. Next slide, please. So in this occasion, you have two persons being aggressive, being assertive in their action. The officer, in this occasion, a concealed carry officer, is softly talking to de-escalate. He does not form the positions of those persons that are aggressive. He's forming the position of aspect of ready and capable, compassionate, but able to de-escalate. Next slide, please. In this occasion, the person is striking at them. That a person strikes at you in some fashion, they could be intoxicated, they could be pushing at you in any position, doesn't mean that it's lethal, doesn't mean. The higher skill the officer has, the least force they'll always use if they are confident. Next slide, please. In this occasion, though, the officer has the right to be able to shoot and use lethal force because they're trying to grab his gun to use against him or someone else. There are many methods to stop the threat, the aggressor, from doing it without refined injury. Next slide, please. So the process, how to make all these things happen, is a process that took me a long time under great levels of pressure to say, how do we have this ability to remain calm, to keep our skills ready, but give a presentation of professionalism throughout our life. Next slide, please. The facility that we have, of course, is both shooting and non-shooting and capable of doing many, many role players to create the scenes as well as the training of the individual and team officers. Next slide. Next slide, please. So the room first, and initially the training room is positive. So that's what's most important. There's no disparagement. There's no beat down. There is no feeling of we're here and they're below us. If we train persons by belittling them, it tends to make them look at the persons they would possibly have to use their skills against as them and us. In this occasion, we challenge them to be better, not belittle, not beat down. We challenge them to be better. The instructors all have to be mentors. And that's one of the biggest things of all, that every instructor's, and there's many great ones, but they have to be mentors in life and mentors as a instructor. They have to live the life that they are teaching. In this room is where they learn the skills and the drills and the capabilities that we later will then apply in a full circle. Next slide, please. And next slide. Now the process goes, and it's somewhat complex, but easy to teach when known. The skills have to work within the short time on which they have to just make that decision. So if their skills are larger and bigger in nature, which is what I learned initially, the more advanced skills took longer to learn, took years to learn. But in fact, they were longer in length of time. So by the time you enact these very complex skills, it's already over. It's already too late. So the skills have to work within that split-second time frame. Next slide, please. Why they are undergoing the, I'm sorry, go back one, my fault. As they go through the training, there's light levels of pressure that allow them to know that when they have to use it, there's going to be pressure on them and how to be confident with it. That has to be in there for that when the attack or when the situation occurs, they have to be ready and used to that level of stress. And in fact, that's what allows them to do better and control it. The mind has to be able to work with the inoculation of stress at this immediate level to make the person see the truth of what's happening. If the training does not enact it correctly, balanced with enough stress to allow it to occur, so where they feel it and felt it before, or to where there's a level balanced between high stress to low stress through this combination, then the officer can respond correctly. Their mind has to turn on to a more accurate method when stress and attacks or acts happen against them. If not, they are not able to see not only the person, but the scene. They're not able to see the nuances of the person moving to grab something, which is a badge rather than a weapon or knife. They have to be able to see that. So in the training cycle, we have drills that are able to manipulate the mind to see what's happening and respond accordingly to see the truth. The dialing capability means that within all persons, whether they're children or adults or officers, that we always want to act appropriately. If someone says something mean to you or aggressive, that doesn't mean that we have to come back aggressively on that regard. It means simply dialing what is appropriate. If the person makes an attack, the officer has to dial up quickly to defend and then dial down when appropriately. So that dialing is very unique capability to master so that the person is able to, for what happens within that split second, make the appropriate decision. But they have to be able to be aggressive within a split second, and they have to be able to be compassionate, assertive, and calm within the next split second. Next slide, please. So if you look at this, there's the internal dialing of how your mind and body, internal capability is aggressive, assertive, or passive in nature. It changes very quickly. That control is a dialing component that goes up and down, jumps back and forth as the situation evolves through the three-way test, which is that very quick half a second time frame. Then the bottom is expressing that critical moment. Now, external is how your appearance is, hopefully to gain confidence, to be assertive enough to know that that person should not do what they're doing, but always in matching to end for the right result, which is that critical moment to where the officer and all of us, as far as that goes, makes the right decision. Next slide, please. This builds, done correctly, the core confidence in this process. The core confidence means you know you've been there before. You know what to do. You have the confidence to apply it through training. You understand that with confidence, you have a greater chance of using lesser force, not greater. The greater your confidence of knowing these skills, the more the suspect and the person you're dealing with can feel it, can sense it, as well as you know the proper position that you can do in each one of those aspects. Appropriate for each action and situation is just that. With the core confidence, you see the truth, you're able to react within that truth. Next slide, please. This room is dedicated for the individual student. So as the student goes through the group training, they are then brought in to these sections and an instructor works with them individually. So they have that individual ability. We assure that they're ready. We assure that they have the skills correctly from all walks of life. And this is where we really kind of treat them as our family. Because if all of us treated a police officer as our family or the suspect as our family, in all situations, we would be very compassionate to their needs. So in this occasion, we're ensuring that they are trained well enough that when we go to the next part of the process, they have the skills and abilities to succeed, and they'll be confident with that success. Next slide, please. This starts by briefing. Each one of these scenarios and educational levels are briefed thoroughly so they understand what we're doing, what they're going to be asked to do, and how does it apply to them. It goes from individual skills first, for that there is no team or ability unless the individual is trained to their highest level. When you have a team and you have persons coming in or an officer asks for backup, or a fellow officer and partner together, if they do not know the same skills, if they do not have confidence in each other, then they will not necessarily know what to do at that time frame. It has to be seamless and it has to be exact, and they have to trust each other and know their skills are together. These are all done initially, individually, and then after it's done individually, each officer is able to see and understand what the other officers did too through their remediation and video review. Next slide, please. This is the prep room, which is where they get their gear, and it's starting to create a little stress. So remember that we don't get people hurt and injured in that regard, but what we do need to do is that it doesn't matter what we have done, what other officers have done. It matters what they can do and know that they can do. So in this prep room is where there becomes getting their gear ready, going into the next room. Next slide, please. And this is the validation room. It's used for many things, but what it does, we can put smoke in there, sirens, lights, all sorts of configurations to have it be exactly like it is on the street or in where they're doing and applying their duties. Under this duress is where it shows that their force can be used appropriately. That when they leave this, they felt at all levels, from someone being very kind to someone being very aggressive and back and forth very quickly. The persons that are making these initial actions are going from aggressiveness in 1 second, and then the next second, another person being very kind and considerate. The officer has to dial up appropriately, dial down appropriately. All of it's videoed, monitored for review, then remediated. In each one of these drills and skills, the officer cannot leave these drills or skills with not having it correct, for that is what they may do out on the street or in their use of their skills. In all these regards, we then remediate and also are able to data, create, control information that we can pass up to authorities, to their leadership, to be able to know if there is an issue or problem. Sometimes the sheriff or various other persons will bring in persons that are candidates. They have 12, they only need to pick 3. We put them through these skills so that they understand, do they wish to be a police? The police officers, sometimes as they make entry, don't really know what they have to face. So we make sure they know what they have to face, and do they have the makeup, or do they have the purpose and desire to do that profession, but they're fully aware. This goes from individual, it then goes to partner pairs, then it goes to teams. And as you can see around it are all these different rooms that we eventually go into those rooms, and they have to go from helping a child that's in distress to having an armed suspect, to having a person that is preparing to commit suicide and how to deal with them, to have someone that has psychiatric issues and problems and how to deal with them. So the point is, each one of these components are all very, very different. And within a short amount of time, they've dealt with all of it. They all stream together to be aspects that they will use in their profession and have been validated by using it with live people. Next slide, please. This is the observation room, and the observation room is where seniors, officials, we really enjoy and appreciate and invite all legal personnel to all training. We want law and law teams to see it, IGs of all descriptions, attorneys, internal affairs. Everyone needs to see all this so they can calculate, see, and understand exactly what is real, what is appropriate, what is not. It also lets them see within the operator or officer and the person going through it, what is it and how does their character shine? How quickly can they take that remediation? How quickly do they adjust? And are they really the right persons for that job? So the seniors, officers, various persons analyzing can come in and watch this in a one-way mirror and allow them to see their persons go through the process. Next slide, please. After that is the debriefing component. Then it's the video review. Then it's remediation. And after they go through that, depending on the amount of time we have with each student, they do the next level of that and the next level of that. And though it is very complex and large, after the persons learn it, normally in 3-hour blocks, whatever they learn within that 3-hour blocks is where we then are able to utilize and put them through the test to use it. So it doesn't take months to be able to be tested. It takes 3 hours, and then we're able to validate that skill. The point of all this is to find out the problems before it happens in the street or in society. With these components of training, it sheds that. In many occasions, remediation, discussion, more training can stop these actions that we see quite frequently in training on over-aggressiveness or persons that have that tendency. On the same hand, there's persons who have never been in an altercation before. So we have to make sure that they have that ability to defend when necessary. And it's to find all this out before they actually have to apply it. I am open for any questions.
Well, thanks, Dwayne, for this. I really appreciate it. I remember, the last time I was down there, there was a video that you showed at the end of the day that showed, and this is what I thought was one of the more instructive pieces actually of the day, was that there were certain tactics that are currently taught that can only be applied to someone who was not resisting. And then you drew some of the parallels. Now, obviously, we're not getting into the, hey, this is better than that, but it drew some of the parallels to, what could be a quality training and to what you see, some of the videos that we saw, that a lot of the folks just were not resisting, and some of the tactics and the methods that are being taught can only be applied to people that are not resisting. And I thought that piece in particular would be instructive for the committee, because as we go and applying, different legal standards to what's being trained and how that plays out in our court system, there's a nice intersection between, what the ideal would be in terms of what's being taught. And so if you could expound on that, and I know that I'm looking to, absent COVID, we probably would have taken a field trip down there, but looking to get a site visit on the record, on the books for us as well. But if you could just talk a little bit about that, because I think that's where we could really learn a little bit more as well as we go about crafting the law moving forward. So,
well, always invited to come see it physically. It's really insightful to see those and to be able to see all the videos that we were not able to download in such a form. So the first thing is that with all the different components of defending or fighting, one part that we all have to think about is the choreograph. So when you see something and it's choreographed, it means that the person is applying the exact level of force that would happen on the street, and will the techniques apply and work for that choreographed nature. So in that regard, if the person goes slow, and if you understand this and get to watch some videos, you'll see, was the person really fighting or not? Now, in training, if we apply skills that the person choreographs with us, and as we do a technique, they give us our hand, they bend over, they turn their wrist, they get on the side, and we put this pressure on them, we have to say, why did we put pressure on them when we could verbalize, de-escalate, and just have them do what we asked? But many of the skills on the choreographed nature are built on that you do the skill to the person to gain control, which normally causes great pain. Now that great pain should not even apply. Many of the pictures we showed you with the knees on the necks and the arms on the bent back in awkward positions, that creates pain of compliance, but it's choreographed. If the person was not complying, you could never do any of those skills to that person. So what is it that applies directly to a person that's motivated? So what the persons may learn on occasion would be that the suspect is complying to these painful actions. And when they do, it seems like it works. But if it works in complying, it's creating pain perhaps that does not exist, or is the person actually allowing themselves to move in that position because they're complying as a adversary or as a suspect? The second part that is sometimes confusing is that what's built for the sport is a sport. So sport is wonderful. There's many different types of sports of many different types of fightings, and all of them are good for what they do. But in police work, it is something very different. There's no rules, there's no rings, there's nobody waiting and stopping for the type techniques that happen so no one could be injured or killed. In this street application or in the officer's application, it is something uniquely different than any sport. If the sport techniques are done with a heavy bag and you're hitting that heavy bag, you're hitting someone that's holding still. If you try to sweep or throw someone or take someone to the ground and that person is just standing there, yes, you can apply that, but there's no reason to apply that. So the sport is based on a sport that has large volume of configurations that is pressed out to society for them to enjoy. What we have to base our skills on is exactly what's in the technical skills and abilities of the suspect of what is being applied. So when you take outside entities that relate to sports or choreograph, or another component is something that is more aggressive than that, and that is treating persons as if it is you and them, and be aggressive to society and be brutal to gain control. There's the method to where if your confidence is strong enough and it relates to reality of what you have to deal with, use of force will never be an issue, because everyone will see that person was trying to attack. You within that split second is doing something to stop that attack. As soon as that attack is stopped, then you go to another skill to apprehend or control the situation. But if it's choreographed, you never get to the truth. And if it's techniques that relate to a sport where there's no referees or it's utilized in something of that bigger nature, they don't directly apply and creates a lot of the confusion. If there is not the component of controlling our mind and brain and spirit to be used within a split second of confidence, to be able to apply the skills as necessary, it is always going to be a grand liability to society. When anyone sees, whether it's on TV or any other component, a person stomping on a person, grabbing a wrist, twisting them, and they're complying, immediately it's police brutality, what people see. We've never had a problem. We've never had to, other than major demonstrations to and discussions with legal teams and people to help the individual department understand this process. We've never had to go to court to explain or defend any of the skills. For that, if it's done correctly, it is obvious that you had to defend at that moment. If not, and the person continues to attack when the person is not aggressive, that's what creates this terrible brutality. We have done these demonstrations for caucuses of all description. It doesn't matter what race, it doesn't matter anything about the person. Everyone gets it very simply when they see it done with motivated components. Our objective is to do what is correct each and every time and adjust to that each and every time.
I think that's great. I mean, that was one of the more insightful things. I remember, I think that when we get the chance to get the video or actually come down and see it, which was one of the more insightful things as we evaluate things from like chokeholds and everything through to sweep kicks or whatever, it's being able to see that a lot of those methods can only be applied to folks that are already complying. And I think was really, I think informative and educational for me. Okay, Senator Lee, I think I saw a hand go up, so go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Dwayne, for your excellent presentation. I just wanted to ask you, are there standards that you have or training that you have for the officers when dealing with mental health, where they're responding to a mental health, where the individual has a mental health issue? Is there a special consideration and how do you de-escalate one of those types of situations? And especially when the individual is not armed.
Yes, outstanding question.
They appear kind of like, in perhaps the officer's mind, perceived as a dangerous threat, even if they're not.
That's exactly correct. So it's an outstanding question. It is permeating throughout our country. We put this in every aspect of our training, every part of it, from the most aggressive to those that have various mental conditions and issues, for those that are just disturbed and don't understand what's happening, those that are intoxicated. So in our training, we put every one of those individuals there. Now, the key to that answer is really the core confidence component. When the officer recognizes and sees and senses that the person is not within their capabilities, though could be dangerous, it's can they have confidence in themselves to use lesser skills? And it's very important to know the policies that are written are very good. The law is very good, how it says dealing with these things. But the problem is, it's up to the person to apply that. And unless they have the confidence, they will never listen to policies. When they are scared to death, when they don't know the skills, but they don't have that confidence, and the person has an altered mental state or has some of these issues, unless they're used to that, unless they're used to the de-escalation skills, unless they've done it live, like we do it throughout the classes, and get that experience and know that they have a confidence, they have a lesser skill that can be used, then it tends to go to be actually more aggressive because they're more fearful of those acts. We have persons that physically go over all the different venues of what we see and hear from all the persons that have that. And many of the awards actually of police officers that we've trained, even in the last year, have been done and given awards, not only defending their life in big occasions, but actually being able to de-escalate and use lesser skills to encourage that person's health. In one situation, one of the persons were trying to actually kill themselves and injure other people. The person recognized they were not in their normal state and had diabetic shock and was able to apply skills that did not injure or hurt, but saved both himself from himself and other persons around.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Sidner, did you have a question? I saw that you were leaning in, but.
I was contemplating asking the question just about some of the things that we saw last week at the Capitol, and I know, I mean, just from your professional opinion, I know there's been plenty of discussion that's gone around regarding the use of force that we've seen, or the excessive use of force that we've seen against people of color, and the amount or the use of force that was then used on these people who attacked our Capitol. And I think many of us have sat back and you're shaking your heads, because all we kept hearing when you've seen unarmed men and women shot and killed, paralyzed, and the like, and yet you've seen what we saw last week in the same level of force, which I believe would have been justified, not used. And I mean, I mean, as you were going through your techniques, it was just something that had crossed my mind. I don't know if you have an opinion on that or not.
Sure. It's an easy opinion. And if we go back to the three-way test of the skills in each situation, it becomes easy to refine. It becomes easy to analyze. It should not be one law goes for one type of person, the other goes for another type of person. It should never be that way ever. When we do our initial validation, it's always done where no one can see color, race, gender, hardly anything initially. It's the actions and intent of the person. And the person's dealt with appropriately by the actions and intent of that exact split second. Now, what hurts a lot is when a person doesn't have that core confidence and they're not confident in their own skills, it always exasperates everything. If then they've never felt it before, it always makes it more able to accelerate rather than de-escalate. So that's a big component to that. It comes down to the confidence of the person, but it's the intent and actions. If a person is in a situation where the intent and action is to attack, it doesn't matter where it is. If you can't escape, and you have to do it as you would do with your family member. And that's why when we do these demonstrations and the persons in the caucuses can see it, we get them to agree. What would you really feel that you can do and should do, and is it right? So far, everyone agrees to everything that we do when we see it in its context. You agree, because if you don't do that, you would die or be injured, or the other person that you're saving would die or be injured. Now, also, it's very easy to see with skills, why would you be that aggressive when it's not necessary? Now, with the persons, and many of the shootings are this way, and again, much of what I do, I try to keep somewhat private so it doesn't get out to the criminal elements. So I'm cautious with that. I'm happily able to expose it to anybody that is vetted. But this process allows the person to see what is actually happening and think about and see what's actually happening at that moment. And because of that, that's what gives them the capability and edge. So many times, and these validation drills we do will have it clear. A person will come up and touch a person. As they touch the person aggressively, then the person moves away. Though the officer had the right to defend at that moment, let's say he did. But because the stress goes up and their mind goes up at that moment, within that period of time, their mind still sees that they're being attacked. And this is where we see constantly within every group, when a person, we do it on purpose, touches, grabs, and they break away, the person will draw their weapon and shoot them. They'll shoot them. As they're back with no other person but one-on-one, no other threat there. But when we interview them immediate after, and we call it meet the judge, they're able to talk to the video and say why. And they're not they're telling the truth. They're telling what is honestly in their mind, and they're saying the person attacked them. They continues to attack them. When did you shoot? Well, it was when they were attacking me. They had a gun. Now, these are persons from all descriptions. We'll see that the person that attacked them when they went away was still attacking them. And then they shot them. Sometimes after this encounter, the person will cry. When we review the video, it's very emotional for them because they did not have that hatred in their heart. They were just not in control of themselves during that moment. So that's a big part of what's reasonable. And you are seeing all over the country things that don't add up. But if the training doesn't build the core confidence of that individual's ability to do the right thing, they're going to have all these lapses that we see. Shooting people when they're moving, shooting them in the back, but yet they don't know they're shooting in the back. Their mind is not working fast enough, clear enough to actually know what's happening within at every half a second moment. Thank you. And feel free with any questions around that because it's a broad subject, but you're exactly seeing things that are exactly right. You are not wrong in what you're seeing. It's how to put it in order by what is the problem with it. Is it that the person is racist? Is that the person is abusive? And I will be the first person to say that the law officer is the most authorized group there is, that they need to be vetted, have the right mentors, characters to be in that great profession. Most that I know and train are great persons. I also know others that are not, that do not follow the law, use that abusively against persons of their own race and different races because it is a power charge for them. Others are just not trained correctly. They're just doing what they're doing in training. It's not their fault. They're within a half hour to 2 hours. That can be changed very quickly because it's insecurity. There should be never bullies in police. Over dynamics when not necessary. Much of this comes from training inappropriately, passing on skills that are in different type of configurations, whether it's military, police, SWAT teams, variety. We train them all, but we train them all to do the same thing. Be righteous in their actions, do the right thing, and be in control of yourself. Much of the problems that are in our society are when they do a problem and they make a mistake, then they have it within themselves. And now comes the PTSD of that they hit somebody after the fact that they didn't recognize they were doing. They used the wrong call. They were not used to stress before. We come into that quite often also. So it's getting to the root of why is it that they are applying those skills? Is it because they were trained improperly? is because they didn't have the aptitude or the time to become a police officer at that moment? Are they bullies? Are they using the badge to use persons or be aggressive? All that can be looked at in each situation and very easily analyzed. We did do a Nightline episode that helped expose a little bit of that recently.
Thank you for the question and answer. Senator Heddleman, I think you are up next.
Thank you. I couldn't unmute. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I just want to follow up on what you just said. Is it always a matter of training, or what I just heard you say is that sometimes there are people who should not become law enforcement officers? And if that is the case, and that's kind of what I heard you say, if they don't have the ability to have that confidence or to gain that confidence themselves, then what sorts of screening would you suggest, and is that something that you do as part of your program to kind of weed out those people for whom law enforcement is not the best career choice?
Absolutely correct. That is exactly what I was kind of presenting. And that is, when persons go into law enforcement, many times they want a job. We've interviewed all of them. I mean, many of these people we get to interview, their uncle or father was a police officer. They want to serve correctly and honorably. So, but they don't necessarily know the hardships and the difficulties of the profession. So we do that for different officers and different departments, and also we did it for the military, is go through an assessment stage of validation. Obviously, the intelligence, the components of background checks, polygraphs, when they can, all the different things of that are important. But in our skills and training, it comes out. It comes out very quickly, whether they are fearful, and then we empower them. And I will say this, that almost every single person that has the purpose to serve with great effort and tolerance can be trained to do that job. There's a small percentage that we see that have the greatest of purposes, greatest intent, but it really is not what they really wish to do, or is not a part of their psyche to do. But they can always serve. And whenever we see that, we give them opportunities. Do you really want to serve your state or your country? And they do. Then we give them opportunities in intelligence, in first responder, other capacities, in the medical field. And when we do that, that is their field. They wanted to serve, but law enforcement and the stress and threat with that was not necessarily what they thought through. So we have a validation process that shows that very clearly. One of the biggest things we do on that is to eliminate the persons that have come into the job for aggressive and overt actions to use their authority against others. Those that have psychological issues, psychopathic issues, aggressive issues, it comes out in the training. They can't hide it because under stress, it makes it come out. We will then write them up. Obviously, when we see we can remediate and validate, we do. But if it is so severe that when they have these scenarios, rather than risk any part of themselves, they will shoot anyone and everyone, it becomes obvious that these persons are troubles. And within 1,000, all there needs to be is one officer like that, that is abusive, that to try to gain rank or position, exposes and does wrongful warrants and addresses issues inappropriately. That needs to be at the fullest extent of the law, in my belief, in a absolute appreciative lover of all law enforcement in every direction, that if any law enforcement officer does something that is illegal, it is more serious for them than it is for the 20, 12-year-old, 18-year-old kid in the streets. They know the law, they have to apply it more than anyone else. They're the ones we're most looking for and most trying to stop so that they don't cause the disintegration of the reputation of all the great officers. It's very serious. And that is in all of our training, that we look for that, remediate that, and report that.
So I appreciate that. Before we move on to maybe another line of question, I wanted to just acknowledge, and I've called him, but it's official now. So Senator Bailey, this is his first, I guess, experience with JPR being as a member. He's our newest member. So I wanted to just welcome you and say we're looking forward to your expertise and to your background. You obviously have a law enforcement background, and So you've come to us at a critical moment, and we're happy to have you aboard, and just wanted to say welcome.
Congratulations.
Here, let me ask. There you go. There you go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I greatly appreciate the honor of being able to move to your committee, to be on JPR, and to work with my colleagues as we discuss this. I am extremely interested. I have some colleagues that have gone through this training that we are talking about today. And I am sorry that I was a little bit late, but I was delayed with a call with the governor. So I am interested. I did teach force continuum training for probably about 20 years as an instructor with the state. So I am definitely interested in hearing the remainder of this and going back and reviewing what was said earlier.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Looking at the list that CQD is trained, Secret Service, State Department officials, air marshals, but Maryland DNR, there that's on the list, and so it's probably where you had your first exposure there. But a long list of law enforcement agencies. Looking around the Zoom room for any other questions from committee members, and seeing none, I'll just say this: that we look forward to Dwayne. Thank you so much for this. We look forward to engaging you in the future. We definitely want to get a site visit on the books as soon as things clear up with COVID protocol. But I want to say thank you for your service to our state and to our nation, and stellar training. It's hard to kind of get the real flavor of it if you're not there, but I thought this is a good kind of a small window into what you do, and I think how you could benefit the state, and hopefully to broaden our perspective as we move forward in the next couple of weeks. So I appreciate the time, and the members have the materials that were sent to your offices. So you can do a little bit of a deeper dive. And so with that, seeing no more questions, I'll just say thank you very much. Thank you to Sheriff Berry, Mr. Liebno, thank you. And thank you, Dwayne, for your time today.
It's my honor to be with you, and appreciate all that you guys and all the folks, and especially the Maryland Police Training Commission also has done an incredible job. Appreciate all the persons a part of Maryland to try to serve in every way.
Absolutely, this is gonna be it'll be a challenge this year, but I think we've got all the right pieces and all the right expertise, and I'm looking forward to it, and I think it'll be a worthwhile venture, and I think we'll be proud of the work we do on the other end of it. So looking forward to working with all of you.
Outstanding.
All right.
Bye-bye.
You